So I welcome you back. And for today's class, we will see that how come the humans, the respiratory system which they have in their body, this looks like, or how come the components of the respiratory system they appear to be lying inside of our body. The situation is that we human are in the need of this specialized respiratory system because our bodies are enormous. We have to be releasing a lot of energy so that my body's metabolisms or the mechanisms they can go on without any interruptions. And since in the body we would be producing a lot of the carbon dioxide gas, and that carbon dioxide gas has to be removed outside because if you would not remove it outside from the cells or outside from the body, then it can disturb the pH of my blood. Now, this is something that I don't want. The other situation is that my body or the human body is covered by the skin. So, from the skin surfaces, again, the exchange of the respiratory gases cannot be brought about by. So, we are in the need of this respiratory system. So, today we have to actually see as that what do we have in the respiratory system. So we initially have this nose and the nasal cavity. Moving forward, we would have this pharynx, and this would be the common passage of the air and the food that we try to swallow. Then would come the larynx, and then there would be the trachea coming. Forward, there would coming up of the bronchus. The bronchus would further divide into the bronchioles, and finally, we would end up at the level of the alveoli. Now, before I take you to the diagrams of this respiratory system, what we have to see is that if I were to be taking the respiratory system out of the person body and if I would place it on toward the table, then automatically the sides of the respiratory system they would reverse. Okay, like this appears to be lying on my right hand side, but I would call this side as left. Now this lies on my left hand side, but I would call this as the right side. Why? Because the sides have reversed when we would take the respiratory system out of the human body and when we would try to see it or examine it on the table or on some parts, so ultimately the sides they would revert. Now here comes a breathing system that we have developed in case of the human body. And you see that this starts from the nose, and on the inside of the nose, you see that we have got the space within them, and that would be the nasal cavity. The pharynx and the larynx, they are not shown in the diagram. I would take you to them in a while. Now, here you see that here we have got this long tube, and in these long tubes, we have these C-shaped rings of the cartilages. So, this is the trachea with me. And the trachea would further divide into two small tubes, like if I were to zoom it more. So here are the two miniature tubes that get out of the trachea. So here what we have got, this is not the right bronchus, but rather than this is the left bronchus. And here what we have got, so this appears to be on my left hand side, but this is the right bronchus, we say. Moving onward, you see that here we have got this lungs with us, and these lungs they are surrounded by a protective layer, and that protective layer that lies outside of the lungs. So that would be the pleural cavity, or that would be the pleural membrane. Again, I mean, between the pleural membrane and the lungs, there would be the presence of the pleural fluid, so that whenever the lungs they are constantly being expanding and contracting, so ultimately the frictional forces should be reduced. And if you were to see here, then from the bronchus, these miniature tubes that we have got forming or emerging them out, so these are the bronchioles, and these bronchioles they would eliminate themselves up into these air sacs coming. And these air sacs they are entitled as the alveoli, we say. And again, we will see later in coming up in forward in this chapter that here the lungs they are surrounded by the ribs that we have, and in between the ribs there would be presence of these muscles, and these are the intercostal muscles. Now the situation is that this respiratory system that we have got with us, so this is separated from the other systems that we have got in the abdominal cavity. So there would be coming up of this dome shaped sheet of muscle, fibrous sheet of muscle, and this is entitled as a diaphragm. And this diaphragm and the ribs that we have and the intercostal muscles that we have, So they have got a major contribution in the ventilation or the breathing process. So in the next diagram, we will see this part in more of the detail. So here, if I were to be taking you to this diagram that I have got with me as of now, so here you see that from the pharynx now here would be the larynx coming, and then again there is this trachea that we have with us, and this trachea is dividing further into these bronchus that we have. These bronchus, they are further making these mini tubes and further smaller tubes, and they are the bronchioles, and these bronchioles they are terminating in these alveoli, we say. So our lungs, they have to be supported because they are the delicate organs. So what we see is that at the center of my chest cavity, so we have got this central bone, and this central bone is the sternum with us. And to this sternum, there would be the connectivity of these ribs that we have with us. So the ribs, they can be shown like this in your exams, or the other view of the ribs is also, it goes like this. So this is the rib that I have with me. Now the situation is that in between the ribs we have got these muscles coming up, and these muscles they are entitled as the intercostal muscles, and the intercostal muscles further they are categorized into being the internal intercostal muscles and the external intercostal muscles, we say. Okay, like if I were to show you this situation, so if I have got these ribs with me, then you see that at the front, the muscles that would be lying in between the ribs, so they would be the external intercostal muscles. And when we go on toward the back side in between the ribs, so these muscles that would be lying, so they are entitled as the internal intercostal muscles, we say. Now, at any cost, we must not forget that this part that we have in which the bronchioles and the alveoli they are lying, so this is the lungs parenchyma. This is actually the lung that we have got. And these lungs, as I have said above, so they were surrounded by this layer coming up. And this is the pleural membrane, or we call this as the pleural sac. So in between the lungs and the pleural sac that I have here with me, so there would be the presence of a fluid here, and that fluid would be the pleural fluid, we say. Now, the lungs at their bottom, or where the lungs they are terminating, so here we have this dome-shaped sheet of the muscles that is constantly being asked in your exam. So this is what we refer to this as the diaphragm, we say. Now we have to consider another situation that is lying over here. So this would be shown in your exams, and we need to be very much clear at how we are supposed to be elaborating this part of the respiratory system. So you see that here these parts that I have here, so they are the ribs. And in between the ribs, the examiner would show you a band of muscle here and a band of muscle here. So you have to be saying as that these are the external intercostal muscles, and here we have got the internal intercostal muscles, we say. As I have said before, that the ribs that we have and the external and internal intercostal muscles that we have, and along with that, the diaphragm that we have here. So all of them, they collectively would be assisting in the ventilation or the breathing process, we say. So I hope you would be very much clear about the diagram or the structure of the respiratory system that we have got on the inside of the human body.